Welcome to Flip Lesson 83 for the 5th grade. Today we are going to be exploring geometric solids and helping to understand more about 3D shapes, just like what you see here on the screen. Now to do this, we're going to go through an exercise using the website Math is Fun. And so the first thing I need you to do is take this diagram right here, and I want you to copy that down into your notes as we're going to fill these things out. You're also going to need to add these terms, especially the 3 underlined, as these are going to be defined as we go through this. Some review ideas, congruent, parallel, and perpendicular will also be talked about. So go ahead and pause the video at this time and jot these things down. All right, hopefully you have that diagram drawn, and today we want to talk about geometric solids, or solid geometry, which is really looking at 3D shapes. And as we look at 3D shapes, we come into the fact that when you have a 3D shape, you have a shape that has a height, a width, and a depth that all go into this idea. Sometimes we have height times width, and the depth is sometimes still referred to as the length. But when we look at these things, we want to be able to understand different kinds of shapes. So let's go into our first one. Let's go right into the cube, and let's learn a little bit about the cube itself. As you can see, we have a nice spinning cube right here, and I can slow that down to help us understand it a little bit better. But a cube is known by a number of different things, right? First of all, you can see the different colors there, the solid colors there. And those are known now as the faces, which you can see right here. Faces. The faces would be the front side, not front side, the flat side of the different shapes that we're going to be looking at. So as we look at this, we can count it and say, okay, we have yellow, gray, blue, another gray, this greenish color, and this other bluish color. So in the total, we have 6 faces. And so a cube is a 6-face geometric solid. All right. Another term we can look at is the term edges. Edges is where a face and a face come together. So this line right here would be considered an edge, just like this line right here would be considered an edge. So the gray to the yellow has this edge, just like this blue to this gray has this edge right here. And so in the end, if we were to turn this shape around, you could start counting, right? I have 1, 2, 3, 4 edges going that way. And if I go to the bottom, I could say 1, 2, 3, 4 edges going that way. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 edges to connect it. So in the end, I have 12 edges that allow me to do this stuff. From there, we have the last idea, which is vertices. Vertices, of course, are the points or the corners where your edges come together. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then of course on the bottom we're going to have the same amount, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like we see here, we have 8 vertices down here to help us along. So this is our first shape that we want to remember in our table. That would be our cube, which of course is made up of many different squares in a 3-dimensional way. Now, if we head back, our second shape then, of course, would be a cuboid. Cuboid is going to bring in some new ideas, right? Length, width, height, and instead of squares going all around, now we're going to bring in rectangles to help us figure this out. Sometimes we can call this, instead of a cuboid, we call it a rectangular prism. And so you should have both terms there in there for your name. As you look at that, you can see lots of examples of cuboids or rectangular prisms. Different shapes of boxes, different things like that. And in the end, though, if we were to sit there and count up all the faces, edges, and stuff, we would get the same amount of information when it comes to our cube as we did with our cuboid or our rectangular prism. So we have those ideas. One thing we do see in prisms in general is that we see a congruent face. You see this square here is congruent with this side here. It's the same. It's the same size, same shape, and in this case, they're in opposite locations. Just like on this side, each of these rectangles, we see a congruent face on the other side. And so we have that idea to begin with. As we come back to the main page, we can see that prisms really come in lots of different shapes and sizes, right? And what changes in a prism is, you can see here in this diagram, we still have the rectangles that make up some of the faces, but our ends are made of different shapes, and that's going to change the different kind of prism we have. So in this case, we have a triangle on the ends, and so we have a triangular prism, right? So if you're looking at this shape right here, right, you see you have a trapezoid in that sense, and you are creating a different prism in that sense. So you can see lots of different types of prisms, right? Rectangular prism, square prism, a cube technically is a prism even though all the sides are congruent. Triangular prism, pentagonal prism, those are all examples of different things. We're not going to get into irregular prisms. That comes later in a different set of math, all right? But understand that there are these different types of prisms that are out there, all right? Along with prisms, we also have the geometric shape known as pyramids. Pyramids, of course, are famous in Egypt, and we can see that shape. Now, what's different about a pyramid is we do have faces, we do have edges, we do have vertices, and they work the same way, though we do have a couple new terms, right? We have the idea of an apex, which is the point of a pyramid, and of course a pyramid sits on its base, which we can see right there. This is the third shape in your geometric solids table right here. As we look at this, we can see pyramids come in lots of different sizes and shapes, from a triangular prism, which is made completely of triangles, a square pyramid where our base is a square, compared to a pentagonal pyramid where the base is a pentagon. And so you see how the names come in. We can go into the details of a pentagonal prism real fast. So you can see the pentagon right there, and now you can see the different triangles that make up that with our apex, right, which is one vertex, but in a pyramid has that special name of apex, right? And so you see here 6 faces, 5 sides, right? 5 face sides, right, in terms of that are triangles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then the base technically is also a face, so we would say total there are 6 faces, right? So there's 1, and then you can see the other 5 there, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 total faces. So we have that idea when it comes to pyramids, right? So that's our look at pyramids. Next shape we want to look at is another familiar one, our cylinder. Cylinders are a little bit different in the sense that, right, we do have congruency. We have a circle on one side and a circle on the other side, and then we have a curved side that wraps around, and technically it's not really called a face anymore because it's curving around, and so you have a different shape there, but it does fit into our realm of geometric solids. So this is our 4th shape in our diagram, our cylinder. So go ahead and draw your cylinder and name your cylinder there. Next shape we want to remember is the sphere, right? So here's our 3D shape, and of course this is going to be very similar. You understand what a sphere is. It's a ball, simply put, and we're going to get more into spheres later in this year, but right now we just want to identify what a sphere is. And finally, the last one that we definitely want to identify is our cone. Here, very, very similar to a pyramid, but the difference is we're going to have a circle for a base, and then instead of faces, we're going to have this wrapped around shape, so it's going to be smooth. There aren't going to be edges here, and you have that idea. And of course, you have your point, your apex, which comes right there. And so this is our last shape in your diagram, looking at that. Right? Now, the other terms that you wrote down were the idea of congruent. We talked about that. Things we can look at when it comes to different kinds of prisms is we can talk about parallel and perpendicular, and you can see how some of that stuff comes together, right? We see the perpendicular lines, parallel lines. This line is parallel to that line, just like this line makes a right angle with this line, so we have perpendicular. So those are review ideas that will be applied in the lesson. That is lesson 83, looking at looking at geometric solids.